Que hagamos lo propio. Buenas noches.
Gracias. Hola amigos. So, my name is René Redzepi. Come on. I am here to talk to you about Mexico. And I'm here to talk to you about how Mexico saved my restaurant. Okay? And I've written a speech, something that's very personal. I've said it before, but I want you guys also to understand how Mexico and tacos al pastor did something very, very, very special to me. So while I read this, can we just be quiet? Okay. Have you ever burned out? I have. I never thought I would. In fact, when I used to hear people talking about burning out, I didn't understand it. It was like a strange foreign language, and I used to just nod sympathetically. Burning out. Is there really an inner flame inside you? And if there is, why on earth put it out? It was a very, very cold day in 2010. The year was coming to an end, and that year was special for us. We'd been nominated the so-called world's best restaurant for the first time that spring. I'd put out a book. Nobody could cook from it, but it was still selling massively. Our restaurant was full every day, lunch and dinner with gargantuan waiting lists. Everything we had ever dreamt of was suddenly true. Yet still, with all that, there was my wife one morning staring nervously at me, asking, "René, you look exhausted. Are you okay?" Her question sunk in as the zombie stared back at me in the mirror. Was I okay? The question kept lingered all day at work. Am I okay? I kept asking myself. Well, I have every fucking reason to be more than perfectly okay. I went to bed, but I couldn't sleep. Am I okay? Kept echoing as I tried to close my eyes. I did have a few hours of slumber before I stumbled up to brush my teeth, and I stood there with my two hands on the cold sink. I don't think I'm okay. The minute I admitted this to myself, this strange cocktail of melancholy and realization washed over me. I didn't go to work that day. I didn't even call the restaurant. I didn't feel like doing another 16-hour shift. I was staring into thin air, the question in my head consuming every inch of me. I wasn't fucking okay. Let me take you back to a hot summer's day in Macedonia. I was 10 years old. I was with my twin brother and my cousins, and I remember that we were playing with the chickens in our yard. The heat was soaking into us like it never does in Scandinavia. I love that yard. It was a huge, dusty space, always bustling with our precious animals, as all the generations of our family did the daily chores. My cousins, they would be bringing water from the well, hanging clothes on the line, chopping firewood, or milking one of the cows, sorting their rice for dinner. Stuff like that happened every day, year in and year out. I remember how we were suddenly startled by the loud clattering of somebody pounding heavily on the old wooden gate. "Be quiet," my aunt, she shouted as she ran to open the door. It was an uncle from another province. He traveled to us by horse and carriage, like everybody did back then. Nobody had cars. And if you wanted to phone somebody, well, nobody had a phone either. You literally just dropped by. I remember the rest of my family, they poured out the house, cheerfully greeting our relatives. It didn't happen often, maybe 3-4 times a year that we had visitors, and each time it was like pure magic. We danced about us kids because we knew that there would be a special feast to celebrate this occasion. "Hurry up and go find a couple of fat chickens," my aunt whispered to my limp, aging uncle. We cheered. Today would even be one of those days where we did meat. All of us kids followed. We watched in anticipation as my uncle, he ran about trying to catch the chickens. And when he finally did, he gently stretched their necks on a tree stump, and he held them down firmly with one hand, and with the other he lifted a heavy axe. And I remember I was staring intensely, totally mesmerized by the surrender in the chickens' eyes, as if they knew life was about to end. I was abruptly woken by the large thump of the axe hitting the wood, and in a split second, the two heads, they rolled to the dirt, and my uncle, he hit the two dead screaming creatures up. "Come on, release them," my cousin yelled. "Are you sure you can handle this?" My toothless uncle smirked back as he let go of the two chickens, and all of us boys, we chased these headless birds around the yard, yelling and shoving as we pursued the flapping corpses. Once there was no more life in them, I remember that I proudly passed on these two corpses to my aunt, and I was extra proud because I was the one with the most blood on me. So we sat cross-legged in the middle of all the feathers as the women of the house quickly plucked the two animals. We watched in silence, barely stirring as they were carefully prepared, the innards removed, cleaned and chopped, mixed with spices and a fistful of herbs, and then folded into a pan of rice. Half a chili was split and rubbed on the fat birds with salt and good olive oil, and then chucked into the wood oven with a tray of rice and chicken offal underneath, ready to absorb all the fat and juices dripping off the birds as they went from pale yellow to crispy golden. And by that time, the whole house was engulfed in the sweet scent of a roasting fireplace. We watched in anticipation as my aunt, she carried the two trophies. Our eyes were locked on the serving tray as it came to the table. And with a swift movement, I remember this like yesterday, she broke off one of the legs. The sound of the crackling golden skin, the juices bursting out, the rich smell as steam rose from the carcass. Ooh, it makes my mouth water still to this day. That was the chicken of my life. Then 6 years after that, I'm sitting with my pal, Michael, in the cooking school in Copenhagen, and I'm nervous in the classroom. I'd become bored of school, and not knowing what to do, I followed my best friend to become a chef. "Good morning, class," I remember the teacher shouted in that classical, strict teacher monotone voice. "Today we will have a competition," she said. "You will have hours to find a recipe, and then you will have few hours to prepare and cook it. You will be judged by flavor and how it's dressed onto the plate." Me and Michael, we looked at each other, high-fiving, nodding, "Let's fucking win this." We went to the library. You used to do that back then. And we flicked through piles of magazines and books, trying to figure out what to cook. It was hard to decide for us youngsters between all the fancy dishes. Beef stroganoff, lobster thermidor, I was totally lost as I stared down at those glossy pages. I've never even seen a fucking lobster at that time. This isn't working, I said to myself. What do I like about food? I asked myself that question, and for several minutes there was nothing, just a flat line. We were both staring at the white paint in the ceiling. What do I like about food? What do I like about food? Well, up until that moment, the question I'd ask myself was, how the fuck am I gonna get out of this classroom? Or, I really like that girl. How am I going to? But this, what do I like about food? I didn't have an answer. Neither did Michael, and I remember thinking to myself, stop, René, stop, man. It doesn't matter. Why are you thinking this suddenly? Why do you care about this? So I continued flipping through a housewives magazine, and it didn't help us really. There were recipes of quiches, banana cakes, tiramisu, things that sounds fucking weird for two 15-year-old kids. I remember Michael, he made a face, tiramisu with coffee? It all seemed distant, completely unconnected to anything that I knew. Until I turned the page to a beautiful image, and it says, roast chicken and rice with a cashew nut sauce. Hey Michael, we're cooking this, I shouted immediately. And I was transported back to my family's dusty yard. And a new sensation, I'd never tried that before, was spreading in my stomach. Nostalgia, as I looked down at the photo. So, we rubbed the chicken in oil and salt and roasted it like I'd seen my aunt do. And I also remember I asked myself, is this what adulthood feels like? You know, and I saw Michael, he pulled the bird out the oven and it was fragrant and crispy. And I had a new sense of accomplishment as Michael, he shaped the rice into a perfect tower. A masterpiece, Michael said as he spooned the sauce over the golden skin of the chicken. It was a good chicken. It was a very good chicken. But no way. No way. It wasn't the chicken of my childhood. It didn't have the sweet smoke of chestnut wood or the subtle hint of spice from chili. No, but still, on that moment, it felt like the world had become a better place to be in. I was fueled, I was inspired. It was the seed of my culinary journey. Then, almost 20 years later, I found myself looking back, trying to find that seed again. The 2 decades in between have been crazy. After cooking school, I did a long apprenticeship at a classic French restaurant in Copenhagen with 30 seats, you know, wife in the front, husband in the back. I was so eager to learn, soaking in the chef's wisdom. Guys, those were the golden years, man. Each ingredient was a discovery, a new connection to the world. Ooh, the first time that my puff pastry rose properly, or when Philippe, he finally allowed me to fillet a turbot. I was so proud biking home late after work. I know how to fillet fish! I yelled and cheered as if Denmark had won the World Cup. Some years went by, and then Philippe, out of the blue, he told me, that's it. You're ready. Go travel. So I did. I went to France, as you did back then. And I traveled across the border to Spain. I even spent some time in America, but all the while I was absorbing new techniques, other ways of looking at food. I was filling myself with memories, and something was beginning to stir. When I returned to Denmark, I worked some years as a sous chef. I was for the first time being asked to organize menus, schedules. Suddenly you figure out that, you know, cooking in a restaurant is more than cooking. Suddenly it was my responsibility to fix the smelly toilet if it was broken. And then one day, out of the blue again, totally out of the blue, I received a phone call. Go check out this place, the voice on the line said. And so I did, to an old warehouse in a worn-down neighborhood on the harbor side of Copenhagen. A decrepit building standing in rough asphalt and cobblestone. Ooh, I remember like yesterday, the first time that I was running my fingers over the ancient wooden beams and I was thinking to myself, this is fucking it, guys. This is fucking it, man. This is where the question will be answered. What do I like about food? Well, that's almost 11 years ago now. And in between me touching that beam and standing on this stage, a crazy story has unfolded. We've grown from a little shithole restaurant with 4 gas burners and 7 employees. When we opened, we didn't even have toilets. The guests had to physically leave the restaurant to relieve themselves. Can you imagine? Now we have 4 kitchens, 85 employees from 22 nationalities. We have a symposium, we have a food lab, and we have 2 actual stone-laden toilets for our guests. Yes, we have moved up in the world. But still, with all that, there I was a few years ago, staring in the mirror, asking myself, am I okay? What had gone wrong? So I went to Mexico for a month to eat and to repair myself. And I realized that the truth is that I start feeling scared. Scared of losing this worldwide precious attention that we had stumbled into. Success is a marvelous thing, but it can be dangerous and limiting. We'd suddenly become a fancy restaurant. And we started listening to questions like, you should have real silverware now. Or, are you sure there's enough luxury ingredients on the menu? Because, you know, all the guides and institutions, they dictate it. Langoustines, lobsters, caviar. Or should the waiters now wear suits, like their food would improve with a bow tie? I became a miserable fuck. Shouting all the time, pushing people around, the smallest things became disasters. And with enough time spent like that, your inner flame will begin to flutter. Fuck it, I told myself on the Mexican beach, beer and taco in hand. Fuck the real silver cutlery. In Macedonia, I ate the chicken of my life with my bare hands. Are you telling me that a silver spoon would have made it more delicious? No. The quality, what made it special, was having a connection to what we put in our mouths, that it was a rare treat, a moment of celebration. We were receiving guests and wanted to give them the best we could afford to offer. We wanted to make them happy. Fuck the bow ties. From then on, I decided that we would spend all we could afford on ourselves. After all, the people I work with are the biggest gift Noma has given me. The big community of chefs, farmers, foragers, and fishermen, it's like a giant circle of trust and collaboration. We inspire each other, filling ourselves with new knowledge. Yeah, we'd been too worried with what people expected of the so-called, back then, world's best restaurant, instead of focusing on what we expect of ourselves. So we began again to follow our natural instincts and acknowledge that our memories, even how poor they are valuable enough to shape the present. Investing in people instead of commodities changed everything. An ember about to burn out, roaring into a fucking bonfire. And what do I like about food? I can't answer that question simply. Food is everything. It's a metaphor for how we interact with the world on sad moments and on happy moments. It's a vector for conversation. It's a transformation of our environment. With food, we literally consume light and weather. We're putting the world in our bodies. Food becomes you. With food, you can repair yourself. But the reason why I fell in love with cooking, believe it or not, it's got nothing to do with the 85-hour work weeks or the 2 centimeters that I've lost from one of my fingers courtesy of a sharp Japanese knife. No. I fell in love with flavor and what deliciousness, if you allow it, can do to you. It excites you and fuels you. It can be a time machine. It fills you with memories. Yeah. I mean, the critical voice says this. Sure, my body doesn't need it to stay alive, but my mind does. It's the extra icing on top. It is what makes life fun to live. To me, celebrating a well-cooked meal, delicious flavors, whether a 20-course elaborate creation or perfectly cooked chicken from a poor yard in Macedonia, or even tacos al pastor on the streets of Mexico, that's the difference between bodily maintenance and real living. Am I okay? I'm fucking much more than okay. Mi amigos, muchas gracias.